shit. Oh, shit. Good afternoon, everybody. Hello. Greetings to everyone. This your girl Tiffany coming through here live in effect. So before I get started, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, like the channel, share the channel, all that great stuff, etc., etc. All right. So today's topic, I'm going to be focusing on Black radio and DJs because this is Black Music Month. But music would not be where it's at if it wasn't for the DJs. Okay, DJs stand for disc jockeys. Right. So the people that was working the disc jockeys in the radio station. See, people thought DJs always was at the club, not necessarily. Me and them started off working in radio stations. Then they end up getting into the club scene. Okay. And a lot of DJs are producers as well. They make the beats, make the music, or whatnot. I mean, what do you think DJs really are? They're like producers, basically. They combine the sounds together to give it some type of special quality to get people hooked and get people involved in dancing and whatnot. So you can't have Black music without the DJs. So this person I want to talk about today, or I want to bring into the discussion of the conversation, is Jocko Henderson. So Jocko Henderson was from Baltimore, Maryland, and he was one of the prominent DJs at the time. So he was a DJ that was around since the late 60s or mid 60s, all the way on up 2000. That's when he passed away. But he's the one that opened up a lot of doors for hip hop artists as well, to be played on the airways and all of that. All right. So let's go into his history and his information, and I also have some books that covers into Black radio, etc. Okay, so what you see right here is the biography from Wikipedia. So according to the Wikipedia source, it says Douglas Jocko Henderson, who was born March the 8th of 1918, and he died July the 15th of 2000. He was an American radio disc jockey, businessman, and a hip-hop music pioneer. All right. So he grew up in Baltimore where both his parents were teachers. He began his broadcast career in 1952 at the Baltimore station WSID, and in 1953 began broadcasting in Philadelphia on WHAT. What? He hosted a show called Jocko's Rocket Ship Show out of New York radio station WOV and WADO, and Philadelphia station WHAT and WDAS from 1954 to 1964, which was an early conduit for rock and roll. He was known for a distinctive style of rhythmic pattern in his voice, in his radio voice, which he had learned from a Baltimore DJ, Maurice Hot Rod Herbert. This fast-talking jive was exemplary of the style of Black appeal radio, which emerged in the early 1950s after Black urban stations switched to playing bebop. With a heavy reliance on rapid and rhyming, the double integrates and street slang were a hit with audience. Henderson continued on the station WDAS and WHAT until 1974, DJing in Philadelphia and New York, as well as hosting concerts in both cities and TV music program in New York. In addition to Philadelphia, New York, and Baltimore, Henderson was also broadcast on station in St. Louis, Detroit, Miami, and Boston. All right, so let's look under Payola and Scripture Records. All right, so in the 1950s and early 1960s, it was common practice for record companies to lavish gifts on disc jockey in exchange for airplay of their song. This was known as payola, and starting in 1959, it was the subject of congressional hearings condemning the practice. New York disc jockey Alan Freed's career ended when he was convicted of 2 counts of commercial bribery. One, a subsidiary of Skepta Records, created greatest hit collection for Henderson called Jocko's Showstopper and Jocko's Rocket to the Stars. Skepta also gave him publishing rights to songs such as Baby It's You and Will You Love Me Tomorrow, which he eventually sold to avoid the same fate as Freed. And then goes on to talk about later in life. In 1978, Henderson made an unsuccessful bid for a seat in the United States House of Representatives in Pennsylvania's 2nd Congressional District. He also made some early rap records, recording 12 singles for Philadelphia International and Sugar Hill Records hip-hop label. He continued DJing on OD station into the 1990s. He died in 2000 after a long battle with cancer and diabetes. All right, so repetition, retrospect, and influence. The broadcast pioneers of Philadelphia inducted Henderson into their Hall of Fame in 2004. In 2013 interview, Questlove described Jocko Henderson as unofficially the first MC, adopting a jazz style of scat singing into the late disco era, and stated that he was a major influence on the earliest rap and hip hop in Philadelphia in the late 1970s. Okay, so this all the information at the bottom of the page. Now let's talk about Payola real quick. So Payola is a form of payment that DJs receive as a way of the record label company giving them offering to play music on the radios. So a lot of times, what it used to be back in the day, you used to have to call in and request a song to be played on the radio. You called in to make a request. That's how it was back then. But then some artists or some record label companies will pay the DJs to play their music or give them some type of gift. Okay, so that's kind of like cheating in the industry, basically. But now they have a radio act of 1996 that basically said that the song had to be played every hour. So, like, let's say if there's a Mariah Carey song that's out right now, that song will get played every hour. Every other hour, you'll wonder, well, why are they playing that song over and over? Because it's part of the act. So, because that's how artists will get paid. The more airway they have, the more money they're going to see, the more revenue they're going to see. Just like if you played the Mary J. Blige song, Good Morning Gorgeous, all right? And they play it constantly every hour on the radio station. And you wonder, well, why does they keep playing the song Gorgeous over and over? Because that's how record labels get paid. Because that's their compensation. And then they also got to where, like, if you have, for many of us, we download music stream, right? We have music apps like Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube Music. But see, YouTube Music, you just have to pay a monthly subscription and you can skip as many songs as you want to, right? But with Spotify and Pandora and maybe Tidal, you can only skip so many songs. You can't skip too many songs on there. If you skip too many songs, then they gonna put a stop. Why? Because artists, that's how they get paid. They get paid on a certain amount of songs that you play. If the song get played over and over again on the stream, right? The more stream they have, the more revenue they looking at. But if somebody constantly keeps skipping the songs, then they're not gonna get paid as much. They're losing out on money. So that's a way to regulate and control the revenue coming in and out. All right. Peace to Brother Umi. How you doing? Peace. But yeah, that's how they control the revenue that goes in and out, just by letting the listeners know that they can skip a certain amount of songs, or basically the radio station have to play their artist song over and over and over again every hour, so they can be able to see their revenue. Because they're trying to avoid people from doing payola, basically mean the record label company or the artists themselves going to pay the DJ to play their music. So basically, it's cheap. The reason why they doing that because that's cheating your way in the industry. That's not really showing that you working hard and you being dedicated. That's just basically cheating yourself in there, and you stepping on other people's toes and causing them not to be able to get any type of airway and recognition. So that's why certain music, if you know, don't get played like that, because you got artists who done cheat their way through the industry. They were stepping on people's toes. They was paying these DJs or the radio host some money just so they can get their music heard. Again, the industry is a dirty business, but what would we be without black radio? And black radio is always the most important thing in our culture. You know what I'm saying? It's a good thing. It was a great thing that we was able to start our own radio station and have the music that we want to play on the radio, because mainstream radio at the time period wasn't trying to really give black artists airplays like that, or let alone even black hosts, DJs. So it was only fair that many of them step away, branch it away, and started their own radio station. Even video shows, like music video shows, like growing up, when I was growing up, I used to watch See the World, Hits, BT Countdown, the student centers, which they had the HBCUs and all of that. So I'm gonna get into all of that further down the line. But right now, I just want to focus on black radios, because before there was videos, music videos, there were radio station playing music. All right. Now, there is books that you guys can personally look up for yourselves. So I try to find some sources. All right. This one is called Encyclopedia of Black Radio in the United States from 1921 to 1955. So let's look into the introduction. And it says, Introduction to the Beginning of Radio. In order to fully understand the contribution of African Americans to early radio, it is helpful to have a basic understanding of the beginnings of the technology. The discovery of radio technology began in the late 19th century and developed quickly through the first 2 decades of the 20th century. But it was not until after World War I that the commercial prospect for radio began to brighten. In 1920, the KDKA in Pittsburgh, a station developed by Wellington House, broadcast the result of the Harding-Cox presidential election. While there is some debate as to whether this was the true beginning of commercial broadcasting, it serves as a convenient marker for the beginning of what would become a powerful and profitable industry within a decade. So the early money in radio came from selling receiving sets. Broadcasts were simply a byproduct of broadcasters needing a reason for the public to purchase the new radios. Hence, during the early 1920, program quality was relatively poor. Desperate to fill airtime, stations accepted about any talent that walked through their doors. There was little money at the time to pay for quality performance, and in the earliest years, the sheer novelty of the technology sufficient to enthrall listeners. All right, so it goes on to say, while advertising over the airways was initially scorned and condemned by the government and public alike, it became apparent within a few years that there was no other workable way to pay the growing expenses of radio. Government funding early on was discarded as an option. Listener donation did not prove a satisfactory source of income. Finally, in 1922, WEAF aired what is generally considered the first paid advertisement, a 10-minute talk selling apartments in Jackson Heights, New York City. Thus, the radio commercial so familiar to radio listeners today was born. And see, that's the reason why so many radio stations is still running today because of advertisement, not because of donation from people, not because of government funding, but because of advertisement. If it was not for advertisement, a lot of these radio stations would not be around. Same way with television programs that you see, a lot of them are still around because of advertisement. When you have advertisement, mean that you when you promote businesses or companies, right, you're going to get your bills paid. That's how many people get paid. So that's why you hear what they say, this program was sponsored by such and such and such, or this station was sponsored by such and such and such. That means that those companies are bringing about money and revenue to this particular station or a program or whatever. Okay. So we have to understand why advertisement is always used. Now, we don't like to hear advertisement every 5 or 10 minutes or every 30 minutes. I don't like hearing advertisement. I try to skip over them because it gets annoying and it takes away from the group. But that's how these radio stations or even these music apps, that's how they get paid. If you don't subscribe to a monthly premium pay, then you're going to have to listen to the advertisement. And the advertisement is what keep their program running and going. All right, so right here, it talks about radio's African American pioneers. During these formative years for the industry, African American played only incidental roles. None of the inventors credited with contributing to radio development were black, nor were any of the primary businessmen that led the companies that would make fortune from it. That is not to say, however, that African Americans were entirely uninvolved with the new technology. In one of the most thorough retrospectives of Black on Radio, Henry Sampson identifies pioneering Black broadcast by W.C. Handy, the Urbanian Glee Club, and Bessie Smith. Right? So if you guys want to look more into this book, the title of the book is called Encyclopedia of Black Radio in the United States, 1921 to 1955 by Ryan Elliott. All right, so you guys check that book out. That book becomes available. And this one is called Voice Over the Making of Black Radio. So let's go to the introduction. Shifting voices. Language for individual consciousness lies on the borderline between oneself and the other. The word in language is half someone else. It becomes one's own only when the speaker populates it with his own intention, his own accent. When he appropriates the word, adapting it into his own semantics and expressive intention. Prior to this moment of appropriation, the word does not exist in a neutral or in an impersonal language. It is not, after all, out of a dictionary that the speaker gets his words, but rather it exists in other people's mouth, in other people's context, serving other people's intention. It is from there that one must take the word and make it one's own. Mikhail Batin. All right, so in this book, it goes into the formation of how did Black radio get started. Okay, but I want to read something because there's some things on here that's very interesting. All right, so it says in his groundbreaking history of African American humor on the real side, which came out in 1994, Mel Watkins used the term racial ventriloquy. Ventriloquy. Yeah, racial ventriloquy to characterize the mimicry of black speech pattern by white radio entertainers, following a pattern established by minstrelly and blackface actors on stage and screen. White played Negro roles in nearly all the early radio shows in the beginning when programs were not broadcast before a live audience. This new electronic medium made the pretense much easier. The deception depended entirely on mimicking black dialect and intonation. Thus, radio had introduced a new phenomenon, racial ventriloquy. Radio certainly enhanced the possibility and the practice of racial ventriloquy as an invisible theater of the mind. It was the ideal medium for such voice impersonation. But these verbal transgressions were hardly a new phenomenon in popular culture. That characteristic applied more to radio broadcasting in the early 20th century. The roots of racial ventriloquy go back to the antebellum era and are entwined with the rise of slavery. Moreover, the verbal mimicry took place on both sides of the color line, usually as a part of a more complex code of cultural crossover practices. All right. And speaking of that, if you guys really want to get into more depth and detail about pop culture, I would strongly advise you guys to watch each one teach one channel, NBK, New Black Knowledge. So go to each one teach one channel, right, and watch their latest video on pop culture is a weapon. I think the brother True Storian does a great job at breaking down the analysis of how pop culture became a weapon for us African Americans and how we were used as a face and still being used as a face of violence in our community and being able to commercialize the inner city, etc. He does a thorough job at that. So if you guys really want to learn more about minstrel show and the mockery of black people and the story about the coon and the early history of black music, gangster rap music and all that, go to each one teach one. Each one teach one. That's where you guys need to go, and you guys need to go over there and listen to brother Ryborn and True Story, and they give a great synopsis on that whole segment. They give a great synopsis on the subject. It's great. I think people can learn more from over there because they can cover it better than I can. All right. But anyways, that's all I have for today. And I thank you guys for tuning in and watching. So I'm going to go ahead and relax. And I just want to give you some of this information. So I'm just going to post the information up one more time. Okay. All right. So you guys have a good one. Please be safe. And until next time, peace and power, elevation be to all you. And thank you guys that have been subscribed to my channel, been watching my channel. For those of you that are new on here, check out my other video contents on here and go from there. All right. So until then, deuces. This your girl Tiffany, and I'm out.